The Rideau Club Spring Gala had been arranged for 600 people, and 600 people had agreed, in the wordless way of these evenings, to look past anything that did not require their attention. At table 9, near the far edge of the room where the light from the chandeliers thinned out before it reached the tablecloth, a 7-year-old boy sat alone with a small spiral notebook open in his lap and a green crayon held loosely in his right hand. His name was Theo Ashwell. He did not speak. He had not spoken since he was 4, and the doctors at CHIO had explained this to his mother in several careful appointments using words that added up eventually to, "We do not yet know why, but he communicates in other ways, and those ways are valid." His mother, Bridget Ashwell, had written those words down in the same kind of spiral notebook her son carried everywhere. She had them still in the drawer of her bedside table in their apartment on Elgin Street. Bridget was not at table 9. She was across the room at the head table, where her firm's managing partner had placed her because the keynote speaker was a federal infrastructure minister whose department her firm had been courting for 8 months. And the partner had decided that Bridget, who was 34 and had the particular skill of making a person feel she had been waiting all evening, specifically to hear them speak, was the right person to sit 2 chairs down from him at dinner. She had walked Theo to his chair at table 9 and signed to him, "10 minutes, and then I will check." She had done this with her hands, the small private shorthand they had built together over 3 years of speech therapy appointments and library books, and one occupational therapist named Ms. Garrett, who had told Bridget in the parking lot after Theo's second session that her son was one of the most observant children she had ever worked with, that he saw everything, that the trick was not to make him talk. The trick was to make sure the room knew he was listening. 10 minutes had become an hour and 20. Theo had not counted the time by the clock. He had counted it by drawings. There were 9 drawings in the notebook since his mother had left. A woman in a red dress whose earrings he had drawn as small moons. A waiter whose tray he had given too many glasses, so he crossed 1 out. The centerpiece, which was a low arrangement of white flowers he did not know the name of, but had drawn carefully from the left side and then again from the right. 2 men laughing near the bar, their mouths wide and identical. A chandelier, which he had given up on halfway through because the lines became too many to count. A dog that did not exist at this event but that he had drawn anyway, sitting under the chair across from him. That chair was empty. Someone had removed the place card from it sometime during the cocktail hour. Theo had watched them do it. A woman in a black uniform who had come to collect a glass and had paused, looked at the card, looked at Theo, and then taken the card away with the glass as if it were part of the same errand. He had not, since his mother left, been offered anything to eat. The waiters moved in arcs that curved just past table 9. Twice, a tray had come close enough that he had smelled something warm and buttery, and twice the waiter had turned before reaching him. He was drawing the empty chair across from him when the woman sat down. She did not arrive the way the others arrived at tables, with the small announcement of a hand on the back of a chair, a scan of name cards, an exhaled greeting. She came from the direction of the service corridor, walking with the unhurried, ground-covering walk of someone who had spent years moving between rooms where stillness was not available, and she stopped beside the empty chair and looked at Theo first, not at the notebook, not at the crayon, at him. Then she crouched down, not leaned, not bent at the waist in the way adults bent toward children when they were being kind but didn't want to commit. She crouched all the way, one knee near the carpet, until her face was level with his. She did not say hello. She opened her right hand and held it flat beside her own face, fingers together, and moved it in a small forward arc. The sign for hello, simple and unhurried, in the same way Theo's occupational therapist did it. Not quite right. Her wrist was too straight, but recognizable. She had learned it somewhere practical, not from a chart. Theo looked at her. She was perhaps 35. She had the kind of face that had been outdoors recently. There was a faint weathered quality to the skin just below her cheekbones that the chandeliers picked up as warmth rather than age. Her dress was dark green, simple, and she wore no earrings. She had a lanyard looped around her wrist rather than her neck, turned so the card faced inward. The card said Toronto Sick Kids in the strip of text visible below her fingers. She had come from another table or another room, or from somewhere the evening had not planned for. She pointed to the empty chair. She raised her eyebrows. A question. Theo nodded. She sat, and she did it the way someone sits when they mean to stay. Turned the chair a half-degree toward him rather than toward the room, so that her shoulder made a partial wall between him and the nearest cluster of standing guests. The angle was small and deliberate. It reduced the visual noise from his left. She pointed to the notebook. She made the question with her eyebrows again. He turned it toward her. On the open page was the empty chair, the one she was now sitting in, drawn in green crayon with cross-hatching on the seat to suggest the pattern of the upholstery, and a careful absence at the center that he had left blank because he had not decided yet what to put there. She looked at it for a long moment. She did not say, "Oh, how lovely." She did not say, "You're so talented." She pointed at the drawing of the chair, then at the chair she was sitting in, and tilted her head with an expression that said, "You got it right." He had. The cross-hatching was accurate. She reached into the small, dark bag she had set on the table beside her and produced a paper napkin folded into quarters. She unfolded it on the table between them. Inside, a small pile of crackers, the plain kind, the kind that come in cellophane in hotel rooms. She set the napkin flat and slid it 1 inch toward him. She did not take any first. She did not look at him to see if he was impressed. She looked at the room the way someone looks at weather before deciding whether to cross the street. Then she turned back and held up 3 fingers, pointing to herself. She pointed at his notebook. She made a scribbling gesture over her own palm. He understood this as, "I want to learn 3 things from your drawings." This was not, in fact, what she had meant. She had meant to sign something closer to "May I show you something?" But it was a reasonable misread, and Theo, who had a precise sense of fairness, turned to a fresh page in the notebook and held it out with the crayon. She looked at him. She took the crayon. She drew slowly a lopsided heart. She held it up. He took the notebook back. Below her lopsided heart, he drew a corrected one, with the same dimensions but with the valley at the top deepened and the 2 curves made even. He held it up. She looked at the 2 hearts side by side for a beat. Then she nodded once, the way someone nods when they have been told something useful. She touched her corrected heart and then touched her chest. Mine now. His mouth, which had been set in the careful neutral of a child who had learned that expressions were information he could choose to give or withhold, moved at the corner. Not a smile, exactly. The beginning of one, held in reserve. She said, aloud for the first time, "My name is Dr. Hartley. I'm a pediatrician. I work at Sick Kids in Toronto. I came tonight because 2 of my patients' families are here and I wanted to see them." She paused. "I'm going to talk slowly. You can draw your answer if you want." He looked at her. He picked up the crayon and wrote, in careful capitals at the bottom of the page, "Theo." "Theo," she said. "Hello." A pause. The keynote had not yet begun. The room was still at its cocktail pitch, that particular blend of Ottawa evening voices. Bilingual pleasantries, the small clinking of glasses, a burst of laughter from the bar. Theo watched it the way he always watched rooms, categorizing, filing, keeping the information in a part of himself that was very full. Dr. Hartley watched the room too, briefly. Then she said, "Has anyone brought you anything to eat besides those crackers?" "Because I only have crackers," he wrote. "No." She turned without flourish and caught a passing waiter's eye with the particular economy of someone who was used to catching attention across distances without raising her voice. She said 2 quiet words. 3 minutes later, the waiter returned with a small plate of bread and butter and a glass of apple juice with a paper straw. He set it in front of Theo without drama, as if it had always been coming. Dr. Hartley did not call this an accomplishment. She turned back to the notebook. It was at this point, from the corridor that connected the main ballroom to the conference rooms on the east side of the club, that a woman stopped walking. Bridget Ashwell had excused herself from the head table on the pretense of checking on her son, which was also the truth, and she had come through the side corridor rather than the main floor because it was faster. And she had stopped just inside the service entrance because what she saw at table 9 made her stop. She saw the dark green shoulder of the woman turn toward her son. She saw the bread plate, which had not been there. She saw the apple juice with the paper straw, which Theo always asked for when they went out, and which she always had to ask for twice. She saw the notebook open on the table between them. She saw a crayon moving. She had been standing there for some time before she understood that the movement was in both directions. Her son was drawing. The woman was also drawing. They were passing the crayon. Bridget Ashwell had been Theo's mother for 7 years and his primary communicator for 3. She knew the shapes of his attention. He had a look he used when he was being polite, a look he used when he was waiting for something to end, a look he used when he was elsewhere entirely. She could see from the service entrance across the ballroom that he was using none of those looks now. He was using the look he used in Ms. Garrett's office when Ms. Garrett put a new set of materials on the table and said, "You pick." Bridget did not go forward. She stood in the service entrance with her hand at the strap of her evening bag, and she watched a stranger do for her son what she had been trying to engineer for him all evening. What the seating chart was supposed to have achieved, What the advance call to the event coordinator about his particular communication style had been meant to produce, simply, without architecture, because the woman had walked past and looked down. Her hand on the evening bag strap did not move for a long time. The dinner bell rang. The room began its slow reorganization toward tables. Bridget came forward. She reached table 9. She set her hand on the top of Theo's head briefly, and he leaned into it once, an abbreviated gesture that meant, "I know you're here, and I'm all right." Dr. Hartley looked up. She looked up calmly, with the steady, awake eyes of someone who had been on her feet since 6 in the morning and was not, because of that, less present. She did not stand. She nodded once. The professional acknowledgement of one competent adult to another. Bridget said, "You must be. I'm sorry I don't." "Hartley," the woman said. "Meredith Hartley. I'm a pediatrician. Sick kids in Toronto. I was placed at table 14. But your son was alone, so I moved the chair." "He told you." "Did he write it?" Bridget looked at the notebook. "He didn't have to. I asked if I could sit." She paused. "We've been drawing." Bridget looked at the notebook which Theo was now holding against his chest in the way he held things that mattered to him. She looked at the bread and butter, mostly eaten. The apple juice, almost gone. "Thank you," Bridget said. Dr. Hartley looked at Theo. Theo looked at his mother. He turned the notebook out, facing Bridget, showing her the page with 2 hearts, one lopsided and one corrected, side by side. Below them, in his own neat printing, "Her first. His better." Dr. Hartley, for the first time all evening, made a sound that was almost a laugh. Her son lowered the notebook. He picked up the crayon. "May I?" Bridget said to Dr. Hartley, gesturing at the chair on the other side of Theo, the one with the place card for her name that had been there all along. "It's your table," Dr. Hartley said. Not unkindly. As a fact. Bridget sat. For a while, the 3 of them were quiet, in the way that a table becomes quiet when the right number of people have arrived at it. The federal minister was introduced. The room rose in that slow ballroom wave. Dr. Hartley, still seated, looked at Theo and lifted one hand just above the tablecloth and drew very small a question mark in the air. Theo drew in the notebook, a chair with 3 people at a table, very small, seen from above. He held it up. She tilted her head. "Yes, that is us." He added a small dog under one of the chairs. The dog that had not been invited, the room clapped. The minister began to speak. The first time Carolyn Ashworth came to table 9, Bridget had not been back from the head table long enough to have finished half her water. Carolyn was the Gala chair, a woman in ivory silk, who had been organizing these evenings for 11 years, and who moved through this particular room the way a very good conductor moves through an orchestra, touching nothing, adjusting everything. She stopped behind Dr. Hartley's chair with the practiced lightness of a woman who had never, in 11 years, been told no in a way that held. "Dr. Hartley." Her voice was the elevated warmth of a person asking a favor that has already been decided. "I am so sorry to interrupt. Some of our colleagues at table 6 were hoping one of the hospital's community liaisons might come over. The Brandt family has a few questions about the evening's program, and I understand you've worked with them before." Bridget went still. Dr. Hartley turned her head a degree. "The Brandts are at table 6. "They are." Carolyn's smile held its shape. "The Brandt's daughter is 8 years old and has been following the program on her event tablet since the cocktail hour." Dr. Hartley said this in the same register she had used for everything else. Not loud, not performing, simply accurate. She could have explained the auction format to me. She will not need a liaison, a small silence. Carolyn's smile did not change, but something in the corners of her eyes made a very small adjustment, the kind that takes 11 years of this kind of room to learn to produce without producing. "Of course," she said. "I may have been given the wrong impression. I do wonder, though." She rested one hand on the back of Dr. Hartley's chair and tilted her head with the careful warmth of a woman who chaired 3 other committees. "Our hospital representatives are always so wonderful at these evenings. There is, of course, a hospitality area set up off the East Corridor for any colleagues who need a quiet moment during the program. If you'd find that more comfortable." She did not finish the sentence. Dr. Hartley looked at her. "I'm not here as a hospital representative," she said. "I was invited as a guest. My original seat was table 14. I moved to table 9 when the child here was alone. I'm staying at table 9 because her mother has asked me to." Bridget, who had not yet said this aloud, looked at Dr. Hartley. Dr. Hartley did not look at Bridget. She was looking at Carolyn Ashworth with the even patience of someone who has explained a clinical finding to a room that did not want to hear it. Carolyn breathed in. Her hand left the back of the chair. "Bridget." She turned the warmth toward Bridget now. "I hope the evening is going well. The minister's remarks are meant to be brief. I know how Theo can find the longer Ms. Ashworth," Bridget said. Her voice was quiet. Dr. Hartley is welcome at this table. Thank you for coming by. Carolyn's smile became, for one identifiable moment, a fixed thing. Of course, she said. Of course. Enjoy your dinner. She walked back toward the head table with the same unhurried social pace. Theo, who had watched this entire exchange without appearing to watch it, his eyes on the notebook, his crayon moving, turned the notebook toward Dr. Hartley. On the page was a woman in a dress, with a smile drawn as a straight line, and a hand on the back of a chair and an arrow pointing away. Dr. Hartley looked at the drawing. She pressed her lips together in a way that was almost a smile. She took the crayon and drew underneath it another figure, same dress, same straight-line smile, but this time the hand was reaching toward a door, and the other figures at the table were not watching her leave. She handed it back. He studied the two drawings. He added to hers. A small dog, following the departing figure at a distance. Dr. Hartley laughed again, and this time it was not almost a laugh. It was a real one, short and quiet, the kind of laugh that escapes before the person decides to let it. Bridget, beside her, felt the laugh more than heard it. She looked at the woman who had moved a chair from somewhere and brought crackers in a folded napkin, and was now laughing at her son's drawing of a dog that belonged to no one and had appeared, unbidden, in every picture he had drawn all evening. It occurred to Bridget that she did not know this woman's first name. It occurred to her, also, that her son did not know it either, and that he had drawn her twice in the notebook without needing it. Dinner was served at 7:30. The way dinner was always served at this club, in long practiced runs from the service corridor, plates set down in the fluid understatement of staff who had been doing this since before anyone at the head table was a minister. The clatter of it moved through the room without interrupting it. Bridget ate. She had not eaten since a conference room sandwich at 2. Dr. Hartley ate also a little, in the way of someone who eats at a table the way other people eat between appointments, adequately, without ceremony. Between courses, when the program on stage shifted to a tribute video for the hospital's child life department, Dr. Hartley lifted one hand half an inch above the tablecloth and made a gesture toward the notebook, a small opening motion like turning a page. Theo understood this and turned to a blank page and held it toward her. She pointed to herself. She pointed to the blank page. She drew a small figure at a table, a notebook, and outside the window of the building a sky with one star and several question marks. He took the notebook, he drew the same sky, but added, more stars, all connected by fine lines and one question mark left unanswered. She studied it for a moment. She drew the question mark with a circle around it and an arrow pointing at him. He wrote below it, in his careful printing, mine to keep. She read this. She held very still for the smallest beat, the kind of stillness that a child notices and files and an adult rarely produces on purpose. Then she lowered her hand and let him keep the question mark. Bridget, who had watched this without appearing to watch it, set her fork down. She looked at the bread plate, cleared. The juice glass, empty, empty. The notebook open between them. She thought about the advance call she had made to the event coordinator, which had gone to voicemail and been returned by an assistant, who had said, of course, we are very inclusive. We will make sure Theo has everything he needs at his table. She thought about arriving and finding the chair beside him already missing. She thought about the woman beside her, who had not made a phone call or sent a note or coordinated anything, who had walked past a table, looked down and crouched. The tribute video ended. The room applauded. The auction began. Carolyn Ashworth did not return to table 9 during the auction, but she came to the edge of it once, near the end, with a man Bridget recognized as the club's event director. They stood for one moment at the perimeter of the room's sideline to table 9, and the event director said something short, and Carolyn said something shorter, and they both moved away. Bridget watched this from the corner of her eye and did not mention it. Dr. Hartley, beside her, said, she came back. Bridget said, yes, she won't again tonight. Dr. Hartley said, not with satisfaction. As an assessment. Bridget looked at her. The minister had leaned across from the head table to speak with someone, and his microphone had been set aside, and the room had momentarily relaxed. How do you know? She got what she came for the second time, Dr. Hartley said. She wanted to see whether you'd back me or her. You backed me. That's the information she needed. She'll file it and move on. Bridget said, what does she do with the information? I don't know, Dr. Hartley said. That depends on whether she thinks it costs her anything. She paused. In my experience, the people who run these rooms make the calculation very quickly. Theo, without looking up from the notebook, turned it so they could both see. He had been drawing the auction. A man at a microphone, paddles in the air, and at one side of the drawing, a woman in an ivory dress with a small phone in her hand and a tiny calculator superimposed over her face. Dr. Hartley looked at it for a long beat. she said to the notebook rather than to Theo. That is exactly right. Theo put the calculator on the woman's face a second time bolder. The auction ended. The orchestra began the first music of the evening that was meant for dancing rather than background, and the floor began its slow migration away from chairs. Bridget waited for the second song and then leaned into Theo's line of sight and signed, "Library?" It was their word for a quiet room, wherever they were. He signed back, "Yes." Bridget looked at Dr. Hartley. "There's a reading room off the second floor," she said. "The club keeps it for members. It's quieter. Would you?" She stopped. "I'm aware you've already gone considerably out of your way this evening." Dr. Hartley picked up her lanyard from the table and looped it back over her wrist. "All right," she said. Bridget rose. She held out her hand to Theo, and Theo took it with the hand that was not holding the notebook. Dr. Hartley gathered her bag and the folded napkin with the remaining crackers, and the three of them left table 9, walking along the inside curve of the room without pausing for any of the faces that looked up. The reading room on the second floor of the Rideau Club was small and carpeted in a deep sound-swallowing navy, with 2 leather armchairs at right angles around a low table, 1 long window overlooking Wellington Street, and a floor lamp or ormshipping aid that made the room feel, when you entered it from the noise of the floor below, like a different city. The club kept the door propped open during events. A staff member unhooked a small rope when Bridget approached and replaced it after. Someone had set a tray on the low table, water, a plate of shortbread, a folded linen napkin. Bridget showed Theo to the armchair nearest the window. He climbed into it and pulled his knees to his chest the way he sat at home, the way he had not been able to sit all evening. Bridget took the other armchair. Dr. Hartley. Meredith, Bridget had read on the lanyard when the room's quieter light made it possible. Took a low footstool near the lamp and sat on it with the easy economy of someone who was accustomed to finding her own seat. For a while, none of them spoke. Then Theo opened the notebook to a new page. He drew the room, the 2 armchairs, the low table, the tray. He put 3 figures in it. He drew the lamp, giving it a generous circle of light. He held it up. Bridget looked at it. She said, "Yes, that's us." He added outside the window he had drawn a small moon, and underneath the moon at the very bottom of the page, a dog. Dr. Hartley made the short, quiet laugh again. Theo considered the drawing. He wrote, below the dog, "He came after all. He's been in every picture tonight," Dr. Hartley said. Theo nodded. He wrote, "He follows anyone," was paying attention. The room held this sentence for a moment. Bridget said, "Theo." She waited until he looked at her. "Will you tell me? The drawing you did? Of the chair?" Before Dr. Hartley sat down. "Were you drawing it because it was empty?" He looked at her. He wrote, "I was drawing it so something would be in it." Bridget did not say anything for a beat. Then she said, "And now something is." He turned the notebook to show her the drawing again. The empty chair with the cross-hatching, with the blank center he had left. And below it on the same page the drawing of the room upstairs with the 3 figures and the lamp and its generous circle of light, the same chair, occupied. She had not noticed until now that he had drawn them on the same page on purpose. Dr. Hartley, at the window with her water glass, said quietly, "He's been telling the story in sequence, the whole notebook. I think he started when he sat down." Bridget looked at her. Dr. Hartley said, "You can see the timeline in the line weight. He presses harder when something is important." She paused. "The chair you were coming back to. At the bottom of the room, table 9, he pressed very hard. On that one." "He doesn't always tell me things directly," she said. "He shows me." "I know," Dr. Hartley said again. Not as a performance of understanding, as a fact she had met before in other rooms. Theo, who had been listening with the completeness he brought to everything, turned to a fresh page. He drew 2 women, one with an evening bag and one with a hospital lanyard. Between them, a small figure cross-legged with a notebook. Below the notebook, a small dog. He wrote under all of it, "Paying attention." Dr. Hartley read it. She looked at the page for a long moment and then looked at Bridget, and Bridget looked at her, and neither of them said anything for a beat, which was by then its own kind of sentence. Downstairs, the orchestra had moved to its second set. The voices from the floor below were muffled by the carpet and the closed distance and the lamp's warm radius. Bridget thought about the seating chart. She thought about the advance call that had gone to voicemail. She thought about the 2 hours between when she'd left Theo at table 9 and when she'd come back and found the bread plate and the apple juice and the woman in dark green turned toward her son with a crayon in her hand. She said, "Dr. Hartley, Meredith," Dr. Hartley said. A quiet correction. The kind made between people who have been in a room together long enough that last names have become inaccurate. "Meredith," Bridget said, "how long did you? Before I came back, how long were you at the table? About 40 minutes before you arrived. And before that? I was at table 14. A pause. I walked past table 9 on the way to the bar. I saw him drawing. She was quiet for a moment. I have a patient. She's 6 now. She has a notebook like that. She draws everything that happens in the ward, every day. The nurses have learned to check the drawings before they check the chart because the drawings are faster. She set the water glass on the table. I saw him pressing hard on the empty chair. I kept walking. Then I came back. Bridget said, "You came back." "Yes, people don't always." Meredith looked at her steadily. "No," she said, "they don't." It was at this point that Theo, who had been drawing quietly through this conversation, turned the notebook and showed them the page. He had drawn a figure walking away from a table, with an arrow pointing onward, and then the same figure with an arrow curving back. Below it he had written, "She came back." And below that, very small, in the corner of the page, "Like the dog." Meredith laughed again, and this time Bridget laughed too, and Theo watched them both laugh with the expression he used when something he had arranged had worked the way he intended. They stayed in the reading room for 45 minutes. A staff member knocked once to ask if they needed anything, and Bridget said no thank you, and the staff member left, and the room went on being the room it was. Theo ate 2 pieces of shortbread and fell asleep in the armchair with the notebook still open in his lap and the crayon loose in his fingers. Bridget took the crayon before it could fall. She held it for a moment, small, green, worn down on one side. She said quietly, so as not to wake him, "My firm's managing partner is going to ask tomorrow why I left the head table." Meredith said, equally quiet, "What will you tell him?" "I'll tell him my son needed me." She paused, "Which is true. It was also true 2 hours earlier, and I stayed at the head table for 2 hours. Meredith did not offer her anything for this. She did not say, "You did what you had to." She did not say, "It's a hard balance." She sat with it the way she had sat at table 9, present, without filling the space. After a moment, Bridget said, "I do that, make the calculation." She looked at her son sleeping. "I make it very quickly. I got very good at it. I've been making it since he was 4, and the appointment started, and I realized that the world was going to keep arranging rooms where he was an afterthought, and someone was going to have to advocate for him in those rooms, and that someone was me, and that in order to be effective, I had to be in the rooms where decisions were made. That is the calculation." She paused. "Tonight I was in the room where the decision was made and a stranger was at the table with my son." Meredith said, "You came back." Bridget looked at her. "I came back. Like the dog," Meredith said. And Bridget, who had not smiled in a way that reached her eyes since she had walked into this building, smiled. Downstairs, a door opened and someone played a chord that was not the orchestra, and then the orchestra resumed. Theo did not wake. The reading room lamp went on with its warm, undemanding circle of light. On the street below, the after-rain smell of Wellington in May came through the gap at the bottom of the window. And Meredith thought about her ward at Sick Kids, and the girl who drew everything in the green notebook, and the parents who came to those appointments the way Bridget Ashwell had come to this table, carrying the weight of every room that had ever gotten it wrong. She thought about what Miss Garrett had told Bridget in a parking lot, which Bridget had told her quietly, while Theo slept, that he saw everything, that the trick was not to make him talk, the trick was to make sure the room knew he was listening. She thought, he knew I was listening too. That was the drawing of the chair pressed hard. She thought, I almost kept walking. When the car came, Bridget's, called by a contact in her phone while Theo was still asleep. Meredith helped carry the notebook and the dark green evening bag down the service stairs so they would not have to go through the main floor. Theo woke on the landing and looked at Meredith with the clear, unguarded eyes of someone who has just crossed the line from sleep to waking and has not yet put anything back up. He held out his hand. In it was a page torn carefully from the notebook. It was the drawing of the reading room, the 2 armchairs, the low table, the tray with the shortbread, the 3 figures, the lamp with its circle of light, the small moon at the window, and the dog at the bottom. Below the dog, in his printing, he came after all. She took it. At the car, she held the door for Bridget, and Bridget paused before getting in and said, "There is a science museum in Ottawa. There's an exhibit on constellations and star formation that Theo has been asking about for 2 months. He drew the star map tonight, the connected ones. The exhibit runs through the end of June." She stopped. She looked at Meredith. "I'm going to say the thing I'm about to say, and if it is too much, you should tell me." Meredith said, "All right. Would you like to come?" "Not for me. For him, because he's going to explain every exhibit to you in drawings and he will be correct about most of them. And I would." She stopped again. "I would like you to see it." Meredith looked at her for one steady beat. She said, "Yes." Bridget nodded once, the way she nodded when something was settled. Theo, already in the back seat with the notebook open to a blank page, looked out the window at Meredith and made the sign they had used earlier, the small forward arc close to the face. Hello, or perhaps goodbye, or perhaps, with his particular sense of accuracy, both. She made it back. The car pulled forward. She stood at the curb until the taillights were gone, then walked to the cab her colleague had arranged. The drawing was in her bag. She did not look at it again that night. Not on the cab ride, not in the elevator up to her hotel room, not before she fell asleep. She looked at it in the morning, in the pale early light that came off the canal and through the gap in the curtains. She unfolded the page on the white hotel coverlet and looked at the 2 armchairs and the 3 figures and the lamp and the dog. She thought about the star map Theo had drawn, all the points connected by fine lines and 1 question mark he had decided to keep. She thought about the girl in her ward with the green notebook who drew the nurses before they came in. She thought about the weight of the rooms that get it wrong, and the rooms that almost do, and the rooms where someone turns around. She folded the drawing and put it in the inside pocket of her coat. She went to the lobby. She drank her coffee standing up, looking out at the canal. She thought, I almost kept walking. She put the cup down. She went out. It was still early when she walked to the Rideau Street to find a cab to the train. The morning was the particular soft grey of Ottawa between rain and sun, and the trees along the canal path were in the last week of their spring green before the summer darkened them. A man was flying a kite near the locks. The kite was not quite catching the wind, but the man was patient. She watched it for a moment before the cab came. She thought, it will catch.